As members of the craft beer and beer tasting community, we like to write reviews of the beers that we're tasting and share them with other people. But how do we get across our thoughts on beers to other people? And where can we share these? Here are my top tips for how to review beer and where you can share these thoughts. Tip number 1, you want to get yourself in the correct mindset for beer tasting. This may mean that you need a particular glass, maybe you sit in a particular place, maybe you have a little ritual of cleaning your glass and pouring the glass out before you start. By doing a similar thing repeatedly, your mind will remember this as muscle memory and know that you are putting yourself into a situation where you want to fully appreciate a beer. Beer tasting and writing a review can be very different from enjoying a few beers with friends. So if you want to seriously review and assess a beer, then put yourself into a comfortable situation where you can do that meaningfully. Tip number 2 for how to review beer is to make sure that you always use a glass. Part of our beer tasting senses includes looking at the beer. This will inform what our brain thinks we're going to taste before we start. Sometimes this can be deceiving, but we are going to drink beer with an open mind. By putting our beer into a glass, we are also opening up the aromas and flavours, and using an appropriate glass for the beer that you are tasting is always really useful. I like a Teku as a standard all-rounder glass. You may want to consider using tasting glasses, such as this one here, which you can put about a third of beer into so that you can just sip on it and taste it in a meaningful way. You may want to find the exact glass that goes with the beer style that you are tasting, or you could use a nice snifter glass like this one. This is particularly good for dark beers. So consider what type of glass you are using when you are doing your beer reviews. Tip number 3 is what order you are going to assess the beer elements in. I like to write down my opinions on appearance, then aroma, then taste. However, I will be assessing the beer as soon as I open the can because you're going to get some volatile aroma notes at that point. I like to take a sip before I really get into the beer so that I can get an overall impression straight away and find out what element is most prominent, hops, malts, yeast or something else. And then I go into appearance, aroma and taste. You can do these in whatever order works for you, but having a structure for your beer reviews is really useful so that you do them the same every time and so that people you are sharing with can see what you are trying to put across. It's also really important to have a good beer vocabulary and to think about words that everyone can understand to put across what you're saying. For example, a beer can sometimes remind you of something like your grandma's perfume, but if you say this smells like my grandma's perfume, no one else is going to know what that means. It might mean that it reminds you of lilies and floral notes. So when you have those sensory moments where you remember an event or a person, you then need to pick that apart and think of some universal descriptors that other people can understand as well. Tip 4 for how to review beer. You need to remember that your opinion is valid and that you can have an opinion that is different from others. You are an expert on what you taste. So if you find a beer to be minty, but nobody else does, that doesn't mean that you are wrong. It just means that that's how you are picking up that flavour. It's also a good idea to avoid reading what's on the can or any tasting notes until after you have done your beer review, because this can influence what you think you are tasting. Also listening to what other people say about a beer if you are in a situation where you are with more people. If someone says a particular flavour or an aroma, you may start to pick that up even if you didn't before. So it's good to be in kind of a quiet place when you're doing your beer reviews so you can concentrate on what you want to say. Tip number 5. Keep in mind the style of beer that is in your glass. A black IPA, a West Coast IPA and a New England IPA are all from the IPA family, but they are all very different. If you tried to review a black IPA thinking about the characteristics of a New England IPA, it would be very surprising to you and it wouldn't be what you would expect at all, and you might not like it as much as if you had just gone into it trying the beer for what it is. It's important to have an understanding of beer styles. These help you to use the correct descriptors and to understand what is in your glass, if it is something you're going to enjoy or if it's something new to try and to pick apart. Though lots of beers will cross over beer styles, so there's always some experimentation and something new to learn in beer, having a good grounding of a beer style and having some basic understanding of what that beer might be like when you try it is going to help you to really assess what's in your glass. My final tip at tip number 6 for how to review beer is think about where you are posting or where you plan to put your beer review. Shorter reviews are good for places like Untapped or Twitter. You might want to write a very long review going really in depth into what you're tasting in somewhere like a blog or on Facebook or in Facebook forums. And you may want to have a really good photo of your beer and then a medium length description on Instagram. Thinking about where you're going to share your beer review and who you're sharing it with might tailor the way that you write it. Of course, there are other ways that you can share your beer reviews, or you can just keep them for yourself. I like to keep a beer tasting note journal like this. I started this originally when we used to go on craft beer day trips and phone batteries weren't as good, so it would run out while I was trying to write my reviews and I had nowhere to put them. So I wanted something that was pen and paper with me all the time. I found with this that I can look back at the beers that I've tried. It brings back good memories and it's quite a nice mindful way of keeping a journal that really helped me during lockdown in 2020. I leave little spaces to put my pictures in, and you can do this any way you like. I've kept several of these now and I keep them in little archive folders like this. You can also keep notes on your phone, or you can keep them in cloud storage like Dropbox or OneDrive so that you can look back at them to see what you've tried. So those are my tips for how to review beer. Remember that beer is subjective and taste is subjective. We all taste things in different ways and we all enjoy things in different ways. You don't need to really like a beer just because somebody else says that it's the best beer ever. Like the beers that you like and try the beers that you want to try. Remember that there is a brewer behind that beer and they are trying to be proud of their product. There's a big difference between a beer that has faults or off flavours to what people call a bad beer just because they don't like it. Think about the wording that you use in your beer reviews, and sometimes it's better just not to review a beer at all. But most of all, make sure you have fun. Beer is about enjoyment and finding a shared interest in something really creative. Have fun and just enjoy the beers that you are drinking. If you need help with your beer reviews, I have a beer tasting kit on my Etsy shop. Check out the link in the notes below to find the Love Beer Learning Etsy shop. And if you'd like to learn more about beer tasting and beer vocabulary, make sure you're following Love Beer Learning.